Hey teachers, in this video I'm going to show you how I teach students to analyze documents, and that's going to include document interpretation for various kinds of documents, supporting an argument with a document, and sourcing documents. And look, as you know, interpreting historical documents is at the heart of all that we do as history teachers, and if we struggle to teach them to do this, then everything else will be a struggle as well. So let me show you with 3 different kinds of documents, one from each of the AP histories, how I would teach students to do this. You know, usually in these kinds of videos I talk more in generalities, but in this one we're going to get down and dirty into the details, so get ready. So there are basically 3 kinds of documents generally that our students will encounter in our classroom. There are written documents, visual documents, and data-driven documents. And for all of them, the process of interpretation is pretty similar, and I break it down into a 2-part process. You look at, and then you look through. To look at the document means that a student has to tell me what it says, and this is the step that most students often skip, or they think it's so obvious that they don't do it. So to look at the document, I tell them, requires your finger. Whatever you tell me in this step, you have to be able to put your finger on it, and let me show you what I mean. Here's a written document from the APUSH CED. First thing to put your finger on is the attribution, Republican Party Platform 1860. Now, don't skip to what it means yet, we're still looking at it. Okay, now to the document, what else can I put my finger on? And by the way, this is really helpful for them to see you demonstrate what I'm doing here. First thing I see is the phrase normal condition, and that refers to territory in the United States. Okay, and what is the normal condition? Well, freedom. And what does it mean that freedom is the normal condition? Our Republican fathers abolished slavery in all Western territory. And then I could put my finger on a quote. And as a student, I probably don't know that this quote comes from the 5th Amendment, but that's okay because look at what I can put my finger on next. This provision of the Constitution. Okay, so that quote comes from the Constitution. And then the rest is saying that Republicans will uphold that normal condition by legislation. Okay, so now I understand what the document is saying. Now let's move to looking through it, or to put it another way, we ask, what does this mean? And this is where I look at 1860 in the Republican Party platform and I ask, what do I know about these 2 things? Well, the date is on the eve of the Civil War, and a party platform is a document explaining what the Republicans believe about how the United States should be governed. And this is where I draw the conclusion that the Republicans argue that the status of slavery in the Western territories should remain as it has always been, namely prohibited. So then, in order to use this document to support an argument, I want my students to summarize the document in 1 to 2 sentences, and my summary would look like this. On the eve of the Civil War, the newly formed Republican Party promised that if their candidate was elected, they would work to pass legislation to prohibit slavery in the Western territories, and by their reckoning, this was a constitutional necessity. Okay, now let's try the same process for a visual document for AP World, and I'll try to go a little faster. What do we do first? We look at it. And I see this is depicting different social positions of women. And where is it? Oh, France. And when? Oh, 1890. I also see that this poster was mass-produced to be sold to individuals and institutions. I also see that these various women are positioned in a pyramid, and at the center are women farming. And since we're going quick, I just want to pay attention to the woman on the top of the pyramid, and that tells me here that she's a clothier. Okay, now that I've looked at it, let's look through it. As you know, in the 19th century, France was busy industrializing, and that's probably explaining why the clothier is at the top of the pyramid. Additionally, France hadn't industrialized so much that agriculture wasn't still important to their economy, and so even though this part is central, industrialization is arguably more important. And then most obvious, women were fulfilling all of these essential roles in society. So my summary will be something like this. In the midst of France's Industrial Revolution, women played a critical role in many areas of society, most notably in agriculture and manufacturing. And that's it. That's all I want at this stage. And now let's apply this process to a data-driven document from AP Europe. Okay, what can I put my finger on? Well, I'm looking at percentages of the workforce in different economic sectors in France in this giant time period right here. And I can see that as the years go on, the percentage of people working in agriculture significantly decreases. Then I can see that manufacturing remains pretty consistent over time. And then I can see that the service sector increases significantly. Now, in a document like this, when we start looking through it and asking what it means, we could identify a metric buttload of causes and effects, but for our purposes, I'll just identify one. The manufacturing sector grows during this period while the agricultural sector declines, and that makes sense out of what I know about that period. Urbanization occurred because of 2 related phenomena. Number 1, the increasing mechanization of agriculture, which meant less folks needed on the farm. And number 2, the increasing number of jobs available in the cities during the rise of manufacturing. And then into the 20th century, manufacturing is going to become more and more outsourced to developing nations, while many of the available jobs are going to shift toward the service sector. So my summary is going to be this. Over the course of the 19th and 20th centuries, the percentages of workers in each economic sector changed. As agriculture became more mechanized, rural workers migrated to cities to look for work in the manufacturing sector. And later, when manufacturing was outsourced to developing nations, workers in France shifted more toward the service sector. Okay, now that we've got our documents interpreted and summarized, let's see how we might teach our students to use these summaries in service of their arguments. So no matter which subject it is, and no matter what kind of document it is, this step is the same. Whether it's an SAQ or a DBQ, the student will get a prompt for which this document should serve as a piece of evidence in an argument. And the place that many students lose points here is not because they don't understand the document. It's because they don't connect the content of the document back to the topic of the prompt. Or to put it another way, they don't clearly demonstrate demonstrate how this document can be used to support their argument. Well, my solution for that is very simple. First, they need to write out the summary of their document, which they did in the last step, and then start the next sentence with "this shows" or "this demonstrates," after which they will use the language of their argument or the language of the prompt. Let me show you. So let's look at the APUSH document about the Republican platform, and let's just say that the prompt had something to do with evaluating the extent to which the Civil War was caused by political factors. Well, let's begin with the summary. So we begin by inserting the summary. Then, this shows that the Civil War was at least in part caused by political factors, since the Republican Abraham Lincoln's election was a catalyst for Southern secession. And that sentence ties it back to the prompt and makes it plain that this document can be used to support an argument. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for your students to make that connection in writing. It's often the difference between a point and no point. But now we get to the most difficult part, namely sourcing these documents. Now, I've always taught my students the HIP method, or HAP, depending on your persuasion: historical context, intended audience, purpose, or point of view. And if you're anything like me, this has only caused angst and confusion amongst many of your students. Do I have to use all 4 skills on each document? The point of view on document 1 is first person. Isn't the purpose of the document what the document says? HAP analysis, more like crap analysis, am I right? The cloud of confusion is thick, but I came across a new way to teach sourcing, and I think it is so much simpler. And a lot of teachers are abandoning the HIP method and going for the SPY method, which I believe originated with the anti-racist APUSH website. If I have that wrong, somebody let me know. Anyway, SPY stands for summarize, prompt, and why was this written. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that in the previous 2 steps, we already did the summary and the prompt work. So the sourcing question simply becomes, why was this written? And that one question has basically all the sourcing skills bound up within it. So when I ask the APUSH document this question, my answer is this. This document was written to make clear the free soil position of the Republicans with respect to the Western Territory, but it simultaneously seeks to assuage Southern fears that Republicans will seek to abolish slavery in all the states. That's kind of a mashup between historical context, purpose, and audience. Or take the poster with the women. Why was this produced? This poster was produced to highlight the necessity of women in the French economy. However, early European feminists might argue that women are still depicted in lower status occupations, and thus the change is not as significant as the poster claims. And there we have purpose and point of view. And to me, that is so much simpler than asking kids to go through HIPP and figure out which one goes with which document. Just, no. Why was this written? Why was this produced? And so if you can show your students how to do this step by step and really remember what it was like when you yourself didn't know how to do this, then I think they'll really start to understand document analysis and sourcing much better. Now, this video right here will give you a process for teaching students how to write a thesis, and you should probably go there next. Also, click here to have a look at my teacher resource packs for APUSH and AP World, which have class activities for every topic in every unit of those courses. All right, go teach the crap out of those students today. I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Heimler out.